Hi everyone. In this short video training, I'm going to talk about the second conversation in the 5 focused conversations. The objectives conversation. Of course, we're talking about job objectives. Believe it or not, having a properly written job description is the #1 secret to not only managing performance, which is the primary focus of this short video, but also, as you'll see in the end, it's the #1 secret to hiring well. Specifically, I'm talking about creating an outcome-based job description or outcome-based job objectives when talking about performance management. You see, in my work with thousands of organizations all over the world, I've discovered that most performance issues stem from a disconnect between what the manager perceives as meeting objectives and what the staff member perceives as meeting them. We have relied on old school methodologies to write job descriptions literally since the industrial age. Most job descriptions and job objectives consist of a laundry list of duties and responsibilities, which are typically overly prescriptive. They don't usually contain any specific measurables to help the employee understand what they're responsible for achieving to be successful in their role and how that success will be measured. And even if you write additional KPIs for performance management, many of those can fall short as well. They too can be task-based, light on measurements, and use non-specific language. In this video, we'll be talking about how to write very specific, measurable KPIs in real language that can then be rolled into job descriptions so that you are able to hire better people, hold them accountable for performing well, and save you as a manager time and frustration, not to mention adding to the bottom line of your organization. It's time to shatter this old school methodology and to embrace a much easier and more effective practice around job objectives and KPIs. I'd like to demonstrate what I'm talking about with a few examples. You should have a sheet with sample job objectives in front of you. Start with side A. Take a look at these job objectives. Pause me and just think about, what do you notice? What are the commonalities in these job objectives? Go ahead and pause me until you're ready. Great. Let's go through these together. See if you caught them all. I think that these job objectives are a great illustration of how to write tasks, not outcomes. Look at how some of these are written: preparing and submitting tender proposals, work within and manage a team to meet daily processing tasks. Well, the word task is actually embedded in that one. Work closely with the operations team to coordinate sales orders, etc., etc., etc. They don't have any measurements in it. They're not specific. They're not quantifiable. Increase sales opportunities. Well, by how much? To develop new business by liaising with current clients and potential clients with regards to the company's products and services. Well, isn't that a little bit obvious? As a salesperson, won't you be increasing your sales by selling them the company's products and services? That is obvious, but also, by how much? How will they be successful in the role? This is how we get into these circuitous conversations with our staff, where we try and show them that they're not living up to expectations, and they're saying, but I'm doing what's on my job description. I'm increasing these sales opportunities, but not by enough. Well, how do you effectively communicate that? I'll show you how in just a second, because we're going to rewrite this one specifically. Preparing and submitting tender proposals in a timely manner. Oh, I just love that phrase. In a timely manner. What does that mean? And who actually talks about, who uses words like that? I don't think I've ever heard anybody say to me, in a timely manner, but I read it all the time, which again points to the ambiguous language that we use in these job objectives. Proactively work towards team goals aligned to business strategy. Well, what team goals? What business strategy? Where can I find that if I don't know where it is? Preparing and submitting tender proposals in a timely manner. Again, it's ambiguous. It doesn't really say anything. Now, let's go ahead and look at the B side. Pause me again, and we'll talk about what you might notice here. When I do this with a live group, they say things like, well, these job objectives are much easier to read. They're more compelling. They're more inviting. They're more attractive. They convey a sense of importance. They're clear and provide specific measurables for the employee to achieve. They're much easier to manage too. And this is exactly the point. Outcome-based job objectives are, well, first of all, they're outcomes. They're not tasks. So let me ask you a question. If these are outcomes, how many outcomes will any one employee, any one function be responsible for achieving? If you said 10 or even more, think about this again. Think about it realistically. If we are truly talking about outcomes, any one employee, any one function should typically be required to achieve 5 or fewer. And I've seen employees, low skill, no skill, frontline employees that just have one outcome on their job objectives. But 5 or less, when you get ready to rewrite your job objectives, if you start coming up with more than 5, one of two things has probably happened. First of all, you're probably thinking too detailed. You're not thinking high level enough. Think in terms of outcomes. What's the end result of what they'll be doing? What are they responsible for achieving? Or you've got a person who's probably trying to do too much, and you might look at splitting the role. The second principle in outcome-based job objectives is that they can be measured. They're quantifiable. They are truly objective, not subjective. The third is that these job objectives optimally help the employees understand where they fit into the overall organization and why what they do is important. That why is so critical. I'm going to give you a real live case story at the end of this video to demonstrate that. And then finally, they use real language. They don't use ambiguous language. It's specific, real language, the way people would actually talk. Now, let's look at how to turn one of these job objectives from side A of your sample sheet into an outcome-based job objective. And the one that I'd like to look at is the sales and account manager. This came from a real-life job description of a company that I did some work with a few years ago. So go ahead, again, pause me just to refresh your memory. And now, let's look at how we can rewrite this using these 4 principles above. The first thing that we will do is we'll make the purpose of the role much more appealing and convey a sense of importance. So the way that we rewrote this is the role of the sales representative / account manager is to take impeccable care of our existing account and COD customers and to maintain or increase sales per account as well as to develop prospects into new customers. Isn't that more compelling? Doesn't that inspire you to if you are a salesperson, doesn't that give you some more inspiration as to what you'll actually be responsible for achieving and how what you achieve will make a difference to the customer? Now, here's a little bit of a hint. Most employees don't give a flip about how this will benefit the organization. They care first about themselves, second about the team members, and third about the customers. Not necessarily in that order of priority when writing job descriptions, but one of those 3 categories is always embedded in the purpose of the role. Now let's look at how to rewrite these job objectives themselves. So the first one, the way that we rewrote this, you will be responsible for evaluating each existing account quarterly and targeting a percentage increase in sales for that account, and then to meet that quarterly target for 80% or above of all existing accounts. Tender proposals will be submitted within 3 days prior to tender deadline, and you'll be expected to win 75% of all proposals submitted. And then finally, efficiently and effectively meeting customers' needs is your joint responsibility with the operations team. You'll work closely with this team to accomplish all tasks to ensure that all sales and special prices are conferred when available, that invoicing is completed within 3 days of customer orders, and drivers and contractors are managed well to ensure that an on-time delivery with less than 2% of returns is achieved. Successful completion of this KPI will result in 2 or fewer complaints per quarter. Doesn't that give more specific measurements? Doesn't that give more clarity and certainty to the employee themselves as to what they're responsible for achieving? And for heaven's sakes, it certainly gives you as a manager more clarity around what you're going to manage them to. It's, tender proposals are either submitted within 3 days prior to the tender deadline or they're not. It's much more objective, much more measurable, much more clear. Now, I want to take a step back a moment and talk a little bit more about the purpose of the role. The why, if you'd like. As an additional bit of homework for you, I'd highly encourage you to watch an excellent TED Talk by Simon Sinek on how people, including employees, by why you do what you do over the actual what itself. The name of the TED Talk is called How Great Leaders Inspire Action, and it's truly, truly wonderful. I'd like to share a story with you. Now, this happened to me in 2014 with a food manufacturing client of mine in Idaho. We were working together to rewrite job objectives. Now, unbeknownst to me, the supervisor of this particular team, his name was Emmett, and he was responsible for supervising a team of sanitation workers. One of the people on his team was a 19-year-old kid named Tom, who was on a 30-day performance plan. In Emmett's mind, Tom was gone. Tom had a bad attitude, couldn't come in on time. Most of the time, his inspections of the equipment that he was cleaning failed. He just wasn't doing a good job, and he had a bad attitude, and he never had a clean uniform and came in late. So this guy was just a nightmare. So Emmett, not in conjunction with this performance managing of Tom, but in conjunction with me helping them rewrite the job objectives, he rewrote this very detailed, very long, very task-based job description for Tom and his fellow crew members for the sanitation department. And this is what he came up with. Talk about real language. Sanitation is of primary concern to food production. If we don't maintain properly clean and sanitized equipment, people could get sick or die. Now, I challenged him on that, and Emmett was fairly clear that he wanted to use that kind of language because he wanted to convey the sense of importance that these sanitation workers have in the overall production of the product and the overall health and safety of the customer. As the sanitation specialist, you're responsible for helping to keep our customers healthy by preventing bacterial contamination of our product and ensuring that we consistently produce a quality product. Now, luckily, all of the measurements are in standard operating procedures and FDA and health and safety requirements, so we didn't have to list that in detail. Now, I kid you not, one of the outcomes of rewriting this job description was this kid, Tom, came in when the day that Emmett rolled out the new job objectives. Emmett sat down with Tom and talked about the job objective and went over it with him. And he looked at Tom, and Tom's eyes were wide as saucers. And he looked at Emmett and he said, "I had no idea that that's what I was responsible for doing." And the next day, Tom came in on time, clean uniform. He had a completely different attitude, and he was a great worker. He was actually taken off the 30-day performance plan. In his mind, in Emmett's mind, Tom was gone. But just rewriting the job objective and putting the purpose, the why, embedded in the purpose of the role made all the difference in the world. Now that we've covered how to set outcome-based job objectives, I'd like to talk about the objectives conversation itself, because we are talking about monthly conversations. As you know, I subscribe to having monthly one-on-one conversations with all of your direct reports. The feedback and objectives topics are addressed every single month, while the other 3 conversations are rolled in 2 to 4 times a year. So how do you address the objectives conversation? Well, first of all, by setting them properly, as we've just discussed. By the way, if you manage mid to senior level staff, you can have them set their own and then discuss with you, or at the very least collaborate with them. There's nothing saying that you have to set the job objectives themselves. Now, once they're set, research shows that companies that review them quarterly have a 31% increase in performance over companies who employ the old set and forget methodology. So this was a research study done by Burson and Associates and written up in Forbes magazine about April of 2013 by memory. And that's what the research showed. Without a shadow of a doubt, companies that reviewed their job objectives quarterly, now I'm not talking about a wholesale rewrite or revision, but just looked at them saying, are these still relevant and applicable, and tweaked where needed, those companies had a 31% increase in performance over companies who never reviewed them at all. So, of course, you want to hold them accountable for meeting them monthly. Now, this is where the conversation comes in. You sit down, you talk about how they're tracking for meeting these objectives or their KPIs, and if they're not meeting them, then you find out, well, why not? What's going on? And you can ask questions around why they're not meeting them instead of beating them over the head with it. Now, using this strategy, what we see is that performance reviews become a formality. The last thing that I want to talk about today is by saying a little bit about how using these job objectives or this job description, this outcome-based job description format to interview will help you hire the better people, hire top talent. Because outcome-based job descriptions include 2 additional components to the outcome-based job objectives. It includes a purpose of the company itself, obviously the purpose of the role, just like the job objectives do, the outcome-based job objectives themselves, and competencies or innate abilities required to successfully achieve those job objectives. So going beyond skills and experience, what competencies or innate abilities are required to be successful in meeting those outcome-based job objectives? Not only will writing job objectives and job descriptions in this manner help you more effectively hire the right people, this will save you a ton of time and frustration because you will have one document that will serve as the job description, a probationary period framework tool, and a great performance management tool that will also provide clarity and certainty for the candidate around what they are expected to achieve and how that success will be measured. So good luck. I look forward to speaking with you about your own outcome-based job objectives.